I knew it was going to be a long day when I found an invoice for 300 ergonomic mouse beds, every single one already marked urgent, but no one knew who ordered them, where they were stored, or why. Classic Tuesday. So I brewed my black coffee, scalded my tongue like always, and muttered the same thing I had for the last 16 years. Let's fix everyone else's mess before breakfast. That's what operations is, really. You don't get medals. You get midnight calls about broken procurement chains and invoices labeled rat problem urgent. You don't get thanked. You get forwarded an email from HR with no subject line and 6 attachments that'll all be needed yesterday. But you keep going. You keep running the damn company while everyone else plays Visionary of the Month on LinkedIn. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever been the one who made sure the lights stayed on while someone else took the credit, then stick around. And if you like stories where smug people fall on their own policies, maybe give a like or subscribe. Helps keep our little storytelling revenge department well caffeinated. Anyway, my name's Emma. I don't do birthdays in the break room. I don't use words like synergy or ecosystem. And I sure as hell don't waste time explaining to 28-year-old directors of culture why we don't install a foosball table next to the finance servers. My office used to be right off the main hallway, nothing fancy, but it had a working window and I could see who was sneaking in late. A dry erase wall covered in color-coded project timelines. 2 locked drawers, one for active contracts, one for nuclear options. Not weapons, mind you. Just old, forgotten agreements, paper ones. The kind you only keep if you know how fast the internet disappears when someone in the C-suite hits delete. The founder, Richard, respected that about me. He wasn't a warm man, he wore the same pair of loafers for 12 years and once forgot his own birthday, but he knew the machinery. He respected the machinery. That's why he kept me close, even when the board started sniffing around for fresh energy. He knew I didn't need to be in the spotlight to steer the ship. I didn't speak much in meetings, didn't need to. When a department head started blustering about streamlining verticals, I'd calmly slide a printout across the table showing exactly how their genius plan would bankrupt Q3. No one clapped, but they sure shut up fast. By the time we hit $900 million in valuation, I'd seen 6 CMOs, 5 CFOs, and 3 CIOs come and go, but not me. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't political. I just stayed quietly, diligently, updating licenses, renegotiating vendor agreements, tracking every single asset like it was made of plutonium. I didn't drink at work events. I didn't post team selfies. Hell, I didn't even have my last name on Slack. Just Emma Ops, but the real power, it wasn't in the systems, it was in the paper. Because when you've been around since the basement days, since before the series of funding, back when our server room was a broken IKEA shelf next to a space heater, you learn where the bones are buried, and who buried them, and which signatures still have teeth. Richard and I had one thing in common. We both understood that digital could be deleted. Paper couldn't. So we made a habit of documenting the big stuff the old way. Founding documents, charter revisions, transfer clauses. We wrote them in pen, signed them in triplicate, and stuck them in binders so thick they could stop a bullet. Nobody cared. Nobody read them until they had to. Every once in a while, Richard would poke his head into my office and ask, "Still got the charter?" And I'd nod, top drawer behind the stale granola bars and the fireproof USB drive. Good, he'd say. Let it collect dust. I was fine with that. I wasn't looking to climb. I wasn't chasing title inflation or performance bonuses based on engagement per Slack emoji. I just wanted the place to run. I wanted the files backed up. The license is valid. The people paid on time. And maybe on a good day, someone noticing that our Wi-Fi passwords were still password 123. But the higher we climbed, the louder the board got. They wanted fresh blood. Media presence. A face. A name. They wanted legacy. Richard was old school, but even old school founders get tired. He started pulling back, less involved, more advisory. His calendar filled with things like wellness retreat and off-grid reflection. And the whispers started. I heard them long before the announcement. Heard them in elevator pauses and Slack typos and suddenly locked Google Sheets. Something was shifting. I knew the rhythm of the company like the hum of a refrigerator. When it changed, I noticed. And then one morning, 2 months before the fiscal year close, I came in and found a ceramic nameplate on my desk that didn't belong to me. Lucas Hart, interim CEO. That's when I knew the knife had already been twisted. They just hadn't bothered to tell me yet. The official email hit at 9:17 a.m., subject line, exciting leadership transition. One of those overly peppy blasts from HR, soaked in exclamation points and cruelty dressed as opportunity. Read like a hostage note written by a junior comms rep shaking through her third iced matcha. The gist? Richard was stepping back to explore legacy architecture, and Lucas Hart, yes, his son, would be assuming operational stewardship as acting CEO. I didn't blink, didn't pause my spreadsheet audit, just took a sip of lukewarm coffee and moved to the next vendor line item. Richard stepping down? Expected. Lucas taking over. A joke I'd heard in boardroom bathrooms for years. Lucas, who once tried to expense bottle service from a startup accelerator in Chalum. Lucas, who referred to risk assessment as vibe-checking contracts. That Lucas, the thudding footsteps came next. Dress shoes too clean, too loud. My door creaked open like it was scared. I didn't bother looking up, just heard him say Emma, just who I wanted to see. I finally glanced up. There he stood, grinning like a kid who'd found his dad's car keys. Khakis tailored too tight, collar popped like he was daring the company to sue him for being obnoxious. He strutted right in, spinning a phone on his finger. Mind if I? He said, already halfway into my chair. He didn't wait for permission. Just dropped into my seat, kicked back like he'd paid for the furniture, and whipped out his phone. The shutter clicked 3 times. New era begins, he said, tapping out a caption. Hashtag disrupt. Hashtag next-gen leadership. He smirked like he'd just cured cancer. I looked at him, slow, level, no sarcasm, no rage, just that deep, ice-cold silence that comes from watching a man pour gasoline on a house and light a match with his own dental records. You done? I asked. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on my desk, suddenly fascinated by a paperweight shaped like a stapler. Listen, this company's growing fast, needs agility. You need to cut legacy clutter. You've done? Great work, really, but I think you'll be happier focusing on archival stuff. He reached into his blazer, pulled out a white envelope like he was handing me a thank you card for babysitting his dog. Here's your new office assignment. Basement level between HR overflow and server cooling. Should be quieter, less chaotic. I opened the envelope. One keycard. No name, no note. Just a line scrawled in Lucas's serial killer handwriting. B3 storage room 7C. Understood, I said, not angry, not scared, just still. He waited for a reaction. I gave him none, didn't flinch, didn't ask what would happen to my team, didn't tell him what I knew was tucked inside the binder in my bottom drawer. I just stood, took my coffee, and left. The new office was a joke. Concrete-walled closet with one flickering overhead light and a chair that felt like it had been stolen from a high school cafeteria circa 1982. The table wobbled. No monitor, no docking station. Just a single Ethernet port blinking like it, too, wanted to die. There were boxes of old HR files stacked in the corner, some labeled Disposal Q4 and others with sticky notes that said things like "Who is Linda?" And not legally shredded. I sat. Slowly, the chair creaked like it didn't believe in me. That was fine. I didn't believe in the chair either. That afternoon, HR came by with a stack of re-onboarding documents. No eye contact, just a forced smile and a mumbled, "If you could sign these by end of day." I nodded. Understood. Again, no fight, no snark, just the word. Because here's what Lucas never grasped, what none of them grasped: the quieter I get, the louder the reckoning. And right then, I was a cathedral of silence. By the end of week 2, Lucas was signing off on decisions like a game show host on Adderall. Entire workflows, years in the making, erased with a red Sharpie and a smirk. Legacy processes are dead, he said at the leadership sync, waving a laminated poster that just said "Move fast, break stuff, outsource cleanup." He started by overriding the cross-functional approval matrix, one I'd built with legal after a 6-month audit nightmare back in 2015. Gone. Replaced with something he called Instinct Ops, which meant that if Lucas felt good vibes from a vendor, we'd wire them 5 figures before a background check. When IT flagged a non-compliant invoice from a third-party data visualization consultant who turned out to be Lucas's ex-roommate from Burning Man, he called it proactive, trust-based leadership. He had the nerve to pull one of my original compliance binders from the archive shelf, flip through it like it was a JCPenney catalog, and say, "God, Emma, this is grandma mode. You printed things?" I didn't flinch. Just leaned back in my folding chair in storage room 7C and sipped day-old coffee through a cracked mug that had once said I read deadlines before the heart peeled off. "Sure did," I said. "Paper doesn't vanish when someone rage quits a shared drive." He laughed like I'd told a joke, then walked away like he'd won. By week 4, HR was a different beast. The director, Stephanie, had always played both sides, but now she was firmly Team Lucas, complete with a new blazer, new haircut, and new PowerPoint on flattening hierarchy. Funny how flattening always seems to mean clearing out anyone over 40 with a working knowledge of institutional memory. One by one, the names started vanishing. Frank in procurement? Gone. Tisha in licensing? Voluntary retirement after 28 years. Mark from Fleet Logistics? Reassigned to Mentor Pod integration and quietly disappeared. The people who knew things, who carried the spine of this company in their cluttered desks and Outlook folders, were being cut off at the knees while Lucas posted blurry gifs of fresh starts on the company's Slack. I wasn't fired. That would have required courage. Instead, I got the corporate slow bleed. My name vanished from the org chart. First, the dotted lines disappeared, then the direct reports. Eventually, my entire operations title was replaced with a vague bullet point: Legacy Process Transition Consultant Internal, a position so fake, even the phishing emails didn't target it. Then came the kicker: an email from HR. No greeting, just a PDF titled Self-Offboarding Guide. The passive-aggressive subject line, supportive next steps. I read it in silence. It suggested I return equipment to assigned facilities, reflect on future fit skills, and complete exit survey to contribute meaningfully to cultural evolution. I didn't respond, not yet, because I knew something Lucas didn't. See, the systems might have changed. The titles, the workflows, the Slack emojis, but the filing cabinet hadn't. That's where I lived now. in loopholes, in footnotes, buried clauses and unexpired authorities that no one had the patience or the clearance to understand. So I printed the offboarding checklist, signed page 1, left the rest blank, filed it in a drawer labeled pending review HR. Then I accessed the old system, the one that predated Lucas, predated even Richard's series of funding. Buried in a database with an IP address so obscure you needed a sticky note and 2 dead admins to remember it. And I toggled a single user status. Operational signatory dormant, reactivate, Y/N? I didn't hit enter, not yet, just hovered. I let the silence build. Let Lucas have his little kingdom. Because while he was busy playing CEO in the executive lounge, I was mapping the pressure points. Watching which vendors hesitated, which licenses stalled, which partners sent strange follow-up emails that got mysteriously deleted from the shared inbox. I didn't protest, didn't march. I waited. Because in ops, you don't get power by shouting. You get it by documenting everything and holding the receipt for when the screaming starts. The building was never truly silent. Even at midnight, it breathed, soft hums from aging servers, distant thunks from climate control systems that hadn't been serviced since Obama's second term, and the occasional eerie groan from ductwork that had seen more secrets than half the board. Perfect soundtrack for a ghost. My keycard still worked. Lucas hadn't thought to disable it. He'd assumed I was self-offboarding, which meant HR marked me as in transition, a status that didn't trigger the auto-revocation script for access badges. Bureaucratic decay is a beautiful thing if you know where to poke. I took the back stairwell, 4 floors up from my storage dungeon, past the HR floor that now smelled like protein powder and unpaid invoices. The 4th-level archive suite. Not many people even remembered the door existed. Fewer still had the clearance to enter. The LED panel blinked red, then green. Click. I slipped inside, flicking the switch to low lighting. Fluorescence buzzed reluctantly to life, casting pale beams over steel filing racks and dust-choked cabinets. It smelled like old toner and forgotten pay stubs, my kind of church. I walked past the active retention shelves, legal audits, vendor renewals, compliance documentation from the years Lucas liked to call prehistoric. At the far end was a wall safe built into the concrete. Behind that, a fireproof cabinet we'd installed back in 2001, when we'd gotten our first real government contract. Richard had made me pick the model. Not just fireproof, I'd told him. Impact rated, and resistant to water, tampering, and stupidity. He nodded, then said, "Make sure I never need to open it." I didn't use a key. I didn't need one. The passcode was 5 digits punched in by muscle memory, my first badge ID. It opened with a hydraulic hiss. Inside, 2 red folders, 1 black binder, 1 sealed envelope labeled in sharp, hard block letters in case of absence/breach. The founding charter was thicker than most people remember. Everyone thinks of it as a few pages and a few signatures. Ours, 42 pages, with addenda. Drafted in triplicate, ink signed and notarized by hand. Each copy had a watermark embedded in the paper, a set of microprint verification codes that tied to a physical ledger stored in a safe deposit box under the founder's name. I didn't need all that right now, just the black binder and the envelope. I laid them out on the center table under the flickering overhead. First, the letter, dated September 1999. The paper was yellowing at the edges, but the ink was still sharp. To whom it may concern, in the event that I am deceased, incapacitated, removed, or derelict in fiduciary responsibility, I hereby designate Emma Hart, Operations Officer, as the legal operational signatory and asset steward of record. Her authority supersedes any future appointment not countersigned by me in writing. Signed, R. Hart, founder September 12, 1999, countersigned by a then-practicing corporate attorney, notarized. Embossed seal still intact. They thought it was ceremonial. Lucas thought it was dead law. But buried in the company's own founding charter, Clause 3C, was a trigger. In the event of leadership misconduct or structural breach, control reverts to the last active operational signatory on record. Richard had insisted on it back then because of his co-founder, a guy named Nolan who tried to sell company IP to a rival firm over cocktails in Tahoe. Richard had learned his lesson. I had never forgotten it. I scanned the letter and binder, page by page, onto a secured drive, encrypting each file twice, storing copies on 2 air-gapped flash keys. One went in my purse. One in a manila envelope labeled Emma's Gardening Tips, placed in a file drawer in HR's unattended copy room. I didn't need them yet. But the setup mattered. Timing mattered. Because reversion protocol wasn't something you waved around. It wasn't fireworks. It was fuse work. I flipped to the charter itself, pages dog-eared, annotated in pencil, every clause cross-referenced with the last known legal interpretation. I'd updated it annually, even after everyone forgot it existed. Hell, I'd translated it into plain English once just to prove to legal that Clause 9 didn't mean what they wished it did. By 2:04 a.m., the scans were done. I labeled each folder with innocuous names: Q3 process audit, vendor compliance catch-up, dormant role reinstatement. I closed the binder, wiped the table, resealed the safe. Back down to storage room 7C. At my desk, still no monitor, I slid one of the encrypted drives into a backup socket behind a loose tile I'd wedged open with a broken pencil sharpener last year. Then I pulled up my old notes, typed a single phrase into a blank document, and saved it under a randomly generated file name, Trigger Clause 3C, Reversion Protocol. I didn't send it, not yet. That would come later after the right cracks appeared. But I smiled to myself just once as the building groaned in its sleep above me, because Lucas thought he'd buried me. He forgot that some things grow better underground. The email was 3 lines long, one subject, no body, no signature. Trigger Clause 3C, Reversion Protocol. I sent it at 3:12 a.m. on a secure connection routed through an old VPN node we'd used during the Singapore expansion back in 2011. Still active, still buried under my name and billing. No one ever shut it down because no one remembered it existed. The recipient, Philip Morneau, outside counsel. Gray suit, older than dirt, could quote clauses like hymns. Retired 5 years ago, supposedly. But Richard once told me if everything ever goes to hell, call Philip. He'll know which hammer to bring. So I did. No pleasantries, no hope you're well. Just the signal we'd prepped for 25 years ago when Richard was still paranoid and I was still too young to understand how much betrayal could hide behind a smile and a Slack reaction emoji. The wheels were moving now. I wasn't stopping them. Upstairs, Lucas was celebrating like he'd just gone public. He'd posted a glossy slideshow titled Operation Phoenix to the company intranet. Neon text, buzzwords stacked like Jenga blocks. One slide had a cartoon phoenix labeled Legacy Burnoff. Another listed my name misspelled as part of the Culture Shed initiative. His caption, letting go of dead weight to make room for flight. New energy, new blood, new era. Comments from HR and marketing rolled in like flies to a dumpster fire. Fire emoji. Yes, king. Rainbow emoji. So honored to be part of this transformation. Clap emoji. Bold leadership. Rocket emoji. Real CEOs burn the playbook. I read it while eating leftover lasagna from a paper towel in storage room 7C, using a plastic knife because someone had locked the break room drawer again. Dead weight, huh? Cute. That same afternoon, Lucas announced a vision town hall. He was going to cement his leadership legacy and set the tone for the next decade. Even sent a meeting invite to external press. First time in company history their town hall had a media RSVP. Of course, I wasn't invited. My inbox didn't even ping, didn't matter. I had a different audience now. By the next morning, I had a response from Philip, one sentence. No greeting, no sign-off, received. Activating Charter Council review. Hold position. Simple, surgical, like the man himself. The point of no return was now firmly behind me. I didn't tell anyone, didn't warn legal, didn't loop in finance. Why would I? They'd all kissed the ring already. Let them sweat. Instead, I started packaging files, dozens of them. Old insurance agreements with built-in void clauses if certain signatories were altered without documentation. Vendor contracts with triggers for adverse operational restructuring, licensing agreements from when we entered the federal sector, ones that required updated leadership rosters every 90 days or they'd lapse automatically. I knew which ones Lucas had neglected. I counted on it. Every time he ignored a compliance notification, every time he mocked paper people, he lit another match. And I was holding the can of gasoline, just waiting for him to dance close enough. That week, 3 vendors paused payment processing. 2 partners asked for clarification on internal structural alignment. And 1 federal database quietly moved our license status to under review. Lucas blamed legacy lag. He called a company-wide Zoom to say, "We're modernizing too fast for the old frameworks to keep up." Told everyone to embrace the chaos. Said it with a grin like he was at a TEDx on ayahuasca. And I printed out the license lapse notice and slid it into a file labeled Collateral Phase 1. That night, I found the original folder we'd used to draft the charter. The one with Richard's notes in the margins. Paper-clipped, coffee-stained, and still marked with his faded initials. On the back of one page, he'd written a single line in pencil. "If the ship's ever taken by fools, give her back to the hands that built her." I didn't cry, didn't feel vindicated. I felt ready. The hammer had been lifted. It was already falling. The first crack showed on a Tuesday morning, 9:06 a.m., buried inside an invoice rejection from one of our oldest vendors, Flagstaff Systems. They'd been with us since we were running servers off folding tables and renting bandwidth from a guy named Stan. Now, out of nowhere, their payment platform flagged a missing operational compliance certificate. Lucas brushed it off. "Legacy vendor drama," he said, rolling his eyes and sipping from a mason jar full of something called a focus smoothie. "They'll cave once we dangle Q4 numbers." They didn't. Then another ping, this time from Clarion Legal Holdings, one of our partner firms in Europe. Their counsel requested updated leadership documentation before finalizing the next phase of our data sharing contract. Governance assurance required, the email said, requesting confirmation of signatory legitimacy under existing charter framework. Lucas sent back a gif of a shrugging puppy. Seriously, a puppy? That afternoon, he stood in the glass fishbowl conference room, all swagger and bad cologne, telling legal to just Google me if they need confirmation. I watched from the hallway as he smirked, tapped his phone, and leaned back like he'd just solved geopolitics. By Thursday, our software licensing compliance status updated to pending audit. That wasn't an error, that was a warning. Systems like ours don't just go under review, they get flagged. Still, Lucas waved it all off. Probably some out-of-date paperwork. Emma-era cruft clogging the system. And that's when it happened. A junior staffer, Danny from Facilities, 23, new badge, still thought free kombucha was a personality trait, came sprinting into the executive floor with a sheet of paper. Someone left this by the printer. Lucas didn't even look up, toss it. Danny didn't move. I think you should maybe see it. He handed over a single page, printed in full color, laminated. It was the first page of the founding charter. Clause 3C was highlighted in bright yellow. Underneath, in calm, courier font, in the event of leadership misconduct or structural breach, full asset stewardship shall revert to the last active operational signatory of record. And below that, my name. Hart, no commentary, no explanation, just the clause and the name, deliberately left on a shared printer outside the exec suite, right where Danny, who was delivering paper towels to the CEO's private bathroom, would see it. Lucas looked at the page for maybe half a second, then scoffed. Loud, mocking. This is fan fiction. Emma probably left it as a prank. She's got too much free time down there in her janitor dojo. He crumpled the page, missed the trash can, and kept walking. Old paperwork doesn't scare me, he said to no one in particular. The thing is, he was right. Paperwork doesn't scare you, until it does, because paperwork doesn't argue, doesn't blink, doesn't show up on Slack with typos and excuses. Paperwork waits. The fuse was lit, and Lucas. He was still dancing around with gasoline, thinking the smell was progress. Vendors kept stalling. One requested a full breakdown of our operational hierarchy and insisted it be notarized. Another paused shipment of mission-critical components pending compliance revalidation. A few middle managers started asking questions in meetings, soft ones, careful ones. Hey, should we be worried about that audit flag? Who's authorized to sign off on these contracts now that Emma's not on the roster? Lucas deflected every time, turned everything into a joke. Guys, come on, we're not a mom and pop anymore, we're in beast mode. Meanwhile, I updated my folder, printed each inquiry, logged the response, filed it under contingency threads pre-failure. There was no rage in me anymore, no fire. Just the calm detachment of a surgeon marking where to make the first cut. Cold amusement. He thought he was winning, but he wasn't playing the game. He was the game. The morning of the merger preview was all preening and posturing. Lucas had a new haircut, a fresh tan suspiciously timed with last week's strategic offsite, and a custom-tailored blazer that probably cost more than my annual software budget back when we still had budgets. He strutted through the executive floor like a man about to win an Oscar for playing CEO in a direct-to-streaming thriller. His big announcement? A pending merger with a boutique tech firm out of Seattle, lean, flashy, VC-backed, and blissfully unaware of the regulatory quicksand they were about to step into. Lucas had even branded the move, Operation Next Wave. It was printed in holographic foil on the pitch decks. Only one problem. The firm's general counsel, Harold Drayton, a man who'd once redlined his own daughter's prenup, had a question. Before we even think about signing off on this, Harold said in his gravel pit voice, we need a complete compliance re-review. Current charters, licenses, signatory authority, full scope. Lucas blinked, we've already got the numbers. Harold didn't even look up. I didn't say numbers, I said governance. And that includes the founding documentation. Lucas, visibly annoyed, turned to our in-house counsel, Meg, smart, sharp, and clearly uncomfortable. Meg, please tell me we don't have to go dust off Emma's Museum of Sadness. Meg looked pale. Actually, we, might need to, just to be thorough. Lucas scoffed, that document's older than me. Meg didn't laugh, and neither did Harold, who simply said, then it's old enough to outlive your mistakes. They scheduled a pre-merger compliance review for the next morning. Lucas didn't cancel his press interviews. I watched from the security feed archive room, one of the few places they hadn't thought to revoke access. While Lucas rehearsed his talking points into a ring light, legal and audit teams went digging through archive systems and physical folders. It didn't take long. By 11:43 a.m., 3 problems had surfaced. First, the licensing for our software suite was out of sync. Lucas had overridden a renewal process that depended on quarterly confirmation from a licensed operational officer. The field was blank. Status? Lapsed pending review. Second, a vendor we were planning to onboard for the merger was on the federal restricted entity list. Compliance flags had been overridden by someone using an unverified exec credential. The system log tagged the user as L. Hart Temp. Third, they found the charter, not a copy, not a scan. The original, blue ink signed, notarized, watermarked founding charter with the operational override clause in bold font, page 7. Clause 3C, in the event of leadership misconduct or structural breach, full asset stewardship shall revert to the last active operational signatory of record. And there, just beneath it in the unmistakable, spiky handwriting of Richard Hart, operational signatory, Emma Hart. Initialed, dated, valid. Lucas stared at the page when Meg slid it in front of him. He gave a low chuckle, leaned back, and said, "That's adorable. Like finding a cassette tape in your grandma's attic and thinking it still runs the radio." Nobody else laughed, not legal, not audit, not even his newly hired chief brand evangelist, who looked like he wanted to crawl out of the room via Slack. Lucas waved it off. "It's ceremonial. She doesn't even work here anymore. She's been offboarded." "Actually," Meg said carefully, "she hasn't signed the offboarding paperwork. Technically, she still has valid credentials." Silence. Harold cleared his throat. "So what I'm hearing is, your company has an unresolved clause that legally transfers asset authority to a sidelined operational officer under specific conditions. And you've been acting under full executive authority without addressing that clause?" Lucas, still smirking, said, "Come on. No one enforces that stuff." Meg didn't blink. "It's enforceable. Richard signed it. It's binding under the original articles. The clause has never been rescinded." Lucas folded his arms. "Okay, so let's just delete it or write a new one." That's when Harold laughed, a slow, dark laugh. "That's not how foundational governance works, son. You don't get to control plus Z history." Lucas flushed. He stood up. "This is a witch hunt," he snapped. Emma left. She's a glorified file clerk in a concrete shoebox. Meg didn't say anything. She just closed the binder slowly, the sound echoing off the glass conference walls. And I watched it all unfold from behind a one-way glass panel outside legal. Invisible, by design. Because some things don't need to be said aloud. They just need to stand up in court. The all hands was set for Friday at 10 o'clock sharp. Calendar invites had gone out with confetti emojis and historic moment banners. Lucas had hired an event photographer. There were custom lanyards. A next wave breakfast bar with gluten-free quiche and anxiety-lace smoothies. Security even set up velvet ropes outside the main conference hall like we were launching a rocket instead of a regulatory crisis. I wasn't invited. My name didn't appear on the attendee list, or the catering order, or the seating chart that was accidentally left in the copy room, where I just happened to be unjamming the shredder. Didn't matter. I had the agenda. More importantly, I had the charter. The real one, authenticated, blue ink signed. Richard's spidery initials still there on the bottom margin like a wax seal from a forgotten kingdom. Legal had confirmed it, not in an email, not even over a call, but through a silent drop, a fresh printed version of the charter placed on the desk of the general counsel, sealed in a plain manila envelope with a post-it that said, in Meg's neat cursive, "It's valid, she's still it." And now, the freefall had begun. At 7:43 a.m., a paralegal flagged an anomaly in the licensing chain. One of our federal permits had gone from under review to pre-suspension. The compliance portal listed the missing update as operational steward acknowledgement not received. At 8:05, a VC observer from the board requested a call. He'd just been alerted to a series of flagged vendor transactions that hadn't been properly reviewed since Lucas restructured the ops team. "Is Emma still attached to those workflows?" he asked. "Because if she is, we need her name on file or the investment trigger clause won't activate." Meg's assistant stared at her screen for 6 whole seconds, then typed, "Emma Hart has not been formally offboarded and still holds legacy operational status under Charter 3C." At 8:42 a.m., 3 members of the legal team huddled in conference room 5A with the blinds drawn, flipping through printed documents and whispering like churchgoers before a funeral. At 9:17, Lucas was on stage, doing a mic check with the AV tech. Check one, can we boost the bass? I want it to hit like a manifesto." He was dressed for a coronation, designer suit, no tie, sleeves rolled to the elbow like he'd just come from saving a child from a burning building. He wore a lapel pin shaped like a phoenix and carried a note card with exactly 5 bullet points. 1. Vision 2. Burn the old. 3. Rebuild new. 4. Trust the fire. 5. Fly. At 9:36, the firm's external legal liaison called Meg directly. "Is Clause 3C active?" "Yes," she said, "and the name signatory, Emma Hart." There was a pause, then, "Get ready." Inside the auditorium, Lucas paced in front of the stage, hyping himself up like a prizefighter. "This is going to be legacy defining," he said to the brand evangelist, who nodded like his job depended on it, which it did. Backstage, press reps adjusted their tripods. Someone passed around company-branded pens. HR handed out laminated programs titled Our Phoenix Moment. Meanwhile, I sat 2 floors up, alone, my folding chair beside the storage cabinets and a lukewarm thermos of gas station coffee, watching the internal feed on a dusty monitor that hadn't been used since the Christmas security breach of 2014. The legal channel lit up with chatter. "Clause authenticated. Charter is clean. No amendments. Signatory holds. Recommend immediate pause of all comms until GC reviews." "Where is Lucas?" The tension crackled like a live wire. Every new message was a dropped match in a room soaked in kerosene. But Lucas? He didn't feel it. He stood at center stage, beaming, waving to executives who hadn't even noticed the trapdoor under their feet. At 9:58 a.m., just 2 minutes before he was set to begin, Harold Drayton, the founder's personal legal bulldog, entered the building. No badge, no announcement. Just a briefcase and a face carved out of consequence. He bypassed the reception desk, walked straight to legal and asked one question. Do you have the charter? Meg handed it over without a word. Harold opened it, flipped to page 7, nodded once, then closed it gently. Call the founder, he said. Backstage, Lucas lifted his arms like a preacher. It's time, he whispered. It was, but not in the way he thought. Lucas was halfway through bullet point 3, rebuild new, when the side doors to the auditorium swung open with a thud. Every head turned. Harold Drayton walked in like gravity itself had entered the room. No greeting, no theatrics, just one object in his hand, the founding binder. Lucas faltered for half a second, recovered with a smirk. Looks like Legal's got the original bedtime story, he joked, flipping his mic off for a second to chuckle with the COO. Harold didn't smile. He walked straight up to the foot of the stage and addressed the room, not Lucas, not the camera crew, not the press rows. Apologies for the interruption, he said, voice calm, low, final, but we have a situation. You could feel the oxygen leave the space. The AV tech froze, HR whispered to each other behind clipboards. Lucas frowned. What kind of situation, he asked, still gripping his note card like it could shield him. Harold opened the binder with care. Clause 3C, Full Asset Reversion Protocol. Lucas scoffed. What? From that ancient thing, please. That document's older than me. Yes, Harold said, and that's why it still matters, because no one's rewritten it, it was never amended, which makes it legally enforceable in its entirety. Lucas chuckled nervously. So what? Who's the signatory then? Richard, he's retired. This isn't. Harold turned the page, pointed to the signature, and read aloud for everyone to hear. Signatory of record per Charter Clause 3C, Emma Hart. Dead silence. Someone dropped a pen. Camera shutter clicked by mistake. Lucas blinked. She's not even on payroll. She's not, as she was offboarded. No, Meg said quietly from the legal table. She wasn't. She never completed the self-offboarding protocol. She's still listed in the legacy structure as the active operational signatory. Valid credential, valid charter, and per Clause 3C, automatic reversion in the event of leadership misconduct. Lucas's face twisted. Are you kidding me right now? This is nonsense. This is sabotage. Harold didn't flinch. This is law. Up in the top right corner of the LED screen behind Lucas, the company's internal systems began auto-refreshing, first the license dashboard, then the vendor portals, then the governance interface. And then it happened. Live, visible to every employee, every board observer, every investor rep dialed in from a yacht or bunker or corner office. Acting operations trustee, E. Hart. Lucas spun toward the screen. Shut it off, shut that, turn it off, no one moved. Behind him, the security team's radios crackled. Confirming badge access, Lucas Hart privileges revoked. Elevators offline. The founder, watching from his mountain cabin via a secured video line, leaned in close. His camera wasn't muted. His voice came through, rough as gravel. You idiot, Richard whispered, staring at the name on the screen. That's her. In that moment, Lucas stopped being a CEO. He became what he always was, a boy playing with matches in a room full of documents soaked in legal kerosene. I didn't need to be in the room to see it. I was already walking past the glass wall of the auditorium, coffee in hand, binder tucked under my arm. My folding chair down in storage room 7C was already empty. I didn't glance in, didn't wave, just walked, slow and steady, past the rows of frozen faces and stunned silence, as if I was heading to another fire to quietly, calmly put out. Somewhere behind me, a junior staffer whispered, "Who is she?" Another voice replied, "She's the one who wrote the fine print." By the time the doors swung shut behind me, the Slack channels had updated. Lucas's name, removed. Admin credentials, expired. Access to the cloud, revoked. Firewall triggers, armed. At 10:14 a.m., every single official system showed the same 3 words. Trustee, Emma Hart, and I didn't smile. Didn't pause, just sipped my coffee, and kept walking. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.